read us our statement of necessity.
Thanks very much. I'd like to call the August 24th, 2020 special call meeting of the Grants Committee to order. Maria, would you please read the statement of necessity?
Yes, thank you, Alton. This is an emergency scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners Grants Committee, which is taking place via teleconference on Monday, August 24th, 2020. Notice of this meeting was posted to the board's website on Friday, August 21st, 2020. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 844-108(2), if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108(3) defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. As stated, this is an emergency meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners Grants Committee. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to discuss a specific grant issue. All voting will be conducted by roll call. Thank you, Alton.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Michael, do you want to open the meeting by kind of giving everybody the background and read the question that we've been asked to sort of, I suppose,
yes,
deliberate on?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And let me first start by doing a quick roll call. Mr. Heathcote.
I am here.
Ms. Ballard Dibble.
I'm here.
Mr. Brian Tibbs.
Here.
And Mr. Wagster.
I'm here.
I would like to note for the record that Mr. Mr. Ben Bricktaw is not on the call today. Alton, thank you. We were recently contacted. Let me pull up my email here. Recently contacted by a group asking if they could use a 2021 grant proposal and use it to pay student teacher assistants. Here, let me read you a portion of the email that was sent to me directly. And it quotes, "Even as COVID-19 considerations have caused these expenses to decline, however, the need for student workers to assist with both remote teaching and learning and in-person socially distanced instruction has greatly increased. So my question is whether or not it is allowable to request grant funding to cover a portion of the cost of these student workers." And with that is, after consultation with legal and Mr. Heathcote, that is why this emergency meeting was called, because we have a pending deadline for these grant applications. So I will now turn it back to you, Alton, for discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, Michael and Sherelle, thank you for the information, and Maria, thank you for the information you shared with me last week. And given sort of the, I don't know, maybe mixed opinions about this, I thought it would be better if we just called the grants committee together, identified the issues and concerns along with the request, and let's discuss it and hopefully come up with a solution, a resolution to this. So given what Michael has read to us, and Michael, thank you for reading that, one of my initial concerns was, I don't know, and again, I know I served on the grants committee from 2009 to 2013, and then again from when I first rejoined the board in 2017 to now. But I don't remember us having set this precedent before. Susan, I know you've been on for longer than I have, and have had at least as much and probably a lot more experience with that. In your tenure on the grants committee, are you aware, or Michael, Maria, Sherelle, I'll ask you too, are you aware of this precedent being set at some point in the past?
This is Susan. Do you want me to answer first?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Susan, thank you.
Okay. I very distinctly remember John Cawthorn saying no salaries could be paid through the grants money. And then the first paragraph on solicitations, it says funds cannot be used towards staff salaries, administrative costs, et cetera. And even that includes a special fellowship for a speaker to come for a semester. We could not do that. And so we have not done this in the past. This past year, when they were saying they wanted to spend the money more directly per student, we had a few universities that wanted to send students abroad. They were sending everyone in the class that qualified. And then all that got, stopped because of COVID. And then they resubmitted applications to spend the money on computer equipment, software, COVID, 3D printing for COVID, PPE, and those funds were approved. We did an emergency meeting for that. So in my history from the last 8 years, we have not given any money for student salaries. And my other concern is, when I told you all last week that we had just over 100 cases, now we have over 400 cases at UT Knoxville. So I don't know that students are going to be able to be in class anyway. And I just don't feel like it's a good use of our funds. I really feel like we need to provide something that all students can use, not a select few. And I'll put myself on mute and somebody else can speak.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. And before I give my opinion, I would like to hear from Frank or Brian. If either one of you have thoughts or concerns or issues, I'd like for you to weigh in also.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If I may interject just for a moment, this is Michael. So in referencing the guidelines, which I believe were created by John, my predecessor, those are strictly guidelines. Those are not statutory. They're not actually rules. They are just guidelines in which this committee has functioned in the past, and therefore the committee has the prerogative to change how they view these things and whether or not they would consider a student assistant to be a staff member or not. I will say that there has been at least some form of a precedent set for using some of this grant money to pay for students in, I believe it was April or May of this year. Roxana was given emergency ability or powers, I should say, to work with some of the universities who had filed for grant extensions and or amendments. And some of those amendments did in fact involve the payment of student workers. So there's been some sort of a precedent set for this. And that is in keeping in line with the statutes, and that the grant money may be used for program activities.
Michael, this is Susan again. We gave Roxana kind of carte blanche to take care of this emergency situation. And to my knowledge, the committee was not informed that we were going to use money for student salaries, because I was still chairman and I was not given that information. So where there's a precedent, it's only been one time. And, if anybody remembers anything different, please speak up, okay? I'm out.
Hey, Alton, this is Frank.
Hey, Frank.
I don't know if I can give any input much on precedents, but when I first saw this, the main question I had, having had a couple of daughters having doing TAs while they were in college, those were always paid by reduction or elimination of tuition. And I was trying to figure out why we would be paying for something that would, that's the normal way of doing it. Maybe there's a different way now, but it seems like to me the university could easily allow them to reduce their tuition to do what they want to do rather than us giving them money. Now, that was just my concern. And I'd like for somebody to address that. Is that the way that student teacher or teacher assistants are compensated now?
Frank, this is Alton. Of course, I'm not. Susan, I think, interacts a lot with UT. I do with Tennessee Tech and Lipscomb maybe more than any others. I'm not, quite frankly, I'm not aware of how they compensate student workers or student assistants. But I know that, to my knowledge, I didn't think we'd had that request before. You know, what Michael just told us is a little bit different than that. And I'm assuming, let me point this out too. I'm going to reiterate one thing that Susan said. My initial concern was, again, the letters specifically say, the ones that we send out to the colleges specifically says grant funds cannot be used towards faculty salaries, administrative costs, etc. And I again, I know that particular letter has been going out for years. I would think that these student worker compensations would fall into that et cetera, or administrative costs, or et cetera, or salaries designation anyway. The other thing that the rules say is that if we deviate from what we have done previously, that constitutes some sort of a departure from our normal guidelines of how we award these grants, that has to be reviewed and approved by the state's chief procurement officer, who I think right now is Mike Perry with the Department of General Services. Now, Roxana may have gone through that process. Michael, Sherelle, Maria, do you know if she actually went through that process earlier this year and got the Department of General Services procurement officer to agree that this was okay?
Hello, this is Sherelle. I'm not sure what particular passage you're reading from, but I will say that because this doesn't deal with a law or rule, it wouldn't be necessary to go through the chief procurement officer, because you all would still be in compliance either way. If you approve student salaries, you'd be in compliance, and if you didn't, you wouldn't, because there's nothing on point that prohibits or allows it. It's entirely within the board's discretion. So that's why we're focusing on the guidelines.
Alton, if I could piggyback onto that, I sent the letters this year. It was actually one of the kind of the first things that I did when I came on board. I would like to read this passage from the email, or from the letter that was sent to each university, and this passage pertains to the usage of the money, the grant awards. It says, the proposals submitted with the grant applications for this year should be for the primary purpose of financing operations or program activities, which includes but is not limited to programs to pay for intern development or examination fees for students. That is with the exception of the dates and or potentially the addressee. That is a carbon copy of what was sent out last year. So that you can see the definition.
Michael, I apologize. One more time. The letter says that it includes financing operations of program activities, and what was after that?
Which includes, but is not limited to, programs to pay for intern development or examination fees for students.
I think we have I think includes program development or intern development. Maybe something different than what, maybe we have a different interpretation of what that means. Susan, have you dealt with that in the past?
Yes. So let me go back to the intern development terminology. We had a discussion about that over the last 2 years because we don't have intern development in our programs. It's not an engineering, architecture, landscape, or interior design. You're an intern after graduation. So in my opinion, that 2 words need to be taken out of our letter because it doesn't apply. Now, as far as examination fees for students, yes, that does apply, and we have encouraged all of the programs to initiate that within their senior year so that some students are required in some programs to take and pass the first part of the examination before graduation, and others are just encouraged to. But we've also asked the colleges to be able to take some of the money and use that so the students are then in the system to start working toward professional level licensure.
And I can give an
example. Does that ring a bell with
several,
anybody?
It does, and I can give several examples. When we meet with the deans in October, we've discussed this, and each of them uses this money for several things. Some of them don't have classes where the students would get credit hours for the PE exam. Some of them do. And some of them help fund that out of these grants. The ones that do provide credit hours help fund it out of these grants, or they supplement it with these grants. The ones that don't offer, several of the universities offer training programs outside of the classroom that they, in preparation for the FE, in our case, the FE, that they help pay for those services out of our grants or help supplement them from that. So I think intern development really applies, that's more a specific term. When you're talking about an intern, you're somebody, again, as Susan said, you're talking about somebody that's graduated and may be pursuing an additional degree, or they may be, and may be in a work environment. So I don't think it's talking about student helpers or student workers.
Brian, do you have an opinion about this?
But the only thing I'll just say is I'm just open to some leniency with everything at this point, just because of everything schools and we're all going through right now. I guess that's my only general statement.
I think, hey, Brian, and I agree with you. We look, we don't want to be the committee that somebody determined we took a wrong step and they start reviewing and critiquing the uses of our funds, because we consistently and regularly, over a period of time, I remember when I first started this, we were giving out about $200,000 a year, and now we're obviously nearly double that, or right at double that. I think what we're doing and the methodology that we're using these things for is still appropriate. A lot of it is used for assisting with the path towards professional licensure, whether it's, again, in my particular case, it's having classes or tutorials or information available or special outside of credit hour classes for people preparing for the FE. I'm sure the same thing exists for architects, interior designers, and landscape architects. The other part of that was mainly going towards lab equipment or special projects that were maybe senior-based projects that they're performing out in the community. And Susan has brought several of those to the board as part of the October presentations. So I think this is a pretty dramatic deviation from what we've done in the past. I think the universities still could continue to use these funds the way they've used them in the past towards those laboratory laboratory equipment or the online tutorials or guides or assistance in preparation for licensure, or the many other things that we've approved in the past. And I understand, believe me, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that this is a new environment and completely different from anything that we've experienced in the past. However, I'm not, because I know that they still can use the money for other means, and this is one simple request to use it for student workers. My opinion is that while I am sensitive to what he's asking, I know that they can use that money for other things just as beneficially.
This is Brian. I guess the way you break it down was good, actually. I mean, the simplest thing to do would just to kind of stay the way we've already been. The good thing about staying the course is we won't be up for any other scrutiny or any, like, well, wait a minute, you did this last year and this is not what you got. I am, like I said in the beginning, I am very sympathetic to everything that's going on now and willing to be supportive of maybe some things that we typically, I wouldn't be overboard, but somewhat supportive of things that might be a little different, though. But I guess this is pretty remote, pretty starkly different. But yeah, anyway.
This is Susan. Can I add another thought to all this?
I wish you would.
For those of us who have been around, I know Frank has for the last 8 years, John had warned us many times that the department as a whole doesn't understand why we do this. And teaching our students the value of a professional license is very important. And when we helped them buy the 3D equipment and then they produced the PPE early on in the year, it, to me, validated what we're doing for our students and giving them an opportunity to give back to the community as well as to learn. An engineer designed that equipment. I know they did. And we need to support their learning process. To me, supporting a salary of a student to be a helper, while it has value, it is not what our guidelines have, positioned us to do. And I don't want to draw attention to our grant saying that, well, we paid somebody's kids some money and then they dropped out of school or the program they couldn't meet, and then where did our money go? We'll get audited, we'll have to verify what we've done and why we've done it. And I think we need to stay the course. I'm not trying to be the meanie in the group, but I've worked so hard for us to get from that 200,000 to that 400,000, and they're watching us. And we need to spend it the way that will benefit the most number of students. And I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Susan. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or comments?
I guess I would kind of repeat what Susan was saying. It appears to me, and again, I don't know how many, this is Frank, by the way, I don't know how many students would be affected by this, but I would guess 3 or 4 maybe. And so is it a good use of our money to only use it on 3 or 4 students? To me, it's not.
So I sort of sense, this is Alton, I sort of sense that it seems to be maybe, and tell me if I'm misreading this, the consensus of the committee to probably reply back to UT that while we completely understand and are very sensitive to their requests and their needs, that we feel it's incumbent on us to ensure that we follow the guidelines that we feel are appropriate for the program, and that they use the funds for the it's the items, components, criteria in accordance with the criteria that have been sort of previously established. Does that make sense? Does everybody agree with that, or are there other opinions?
Alton, if I could pose a question to you just from a guidance perspective. This is Michael. And that question is actually it's for everybody, but that question is, if schools do shut down and these institutions are unable to either spend the money or they use it for equipment where there's not going to be any students, will we have a problem with that as a board or as a committee or a board? Would we ask them to return the money, or would we say that they go ahead and spend it for equipment?
There are, yeah, thank you, Michael. That's a good question. I know that there are other options available to them that people have, like community service, doing senior projects, or again, providing educational venues that help prepare them for licensure, that they can continue to dedicate this money towards. So there are other venues besides paying for student workers that are still available to them if they don't spend it on equipment, that meet the guidelines and are sort of in compliance with what we've done historically. Susan, did I misstate that?
No, and here's the other thing. They can buy software to put on the computers, and then the students can be given access to that software. And there is an architecture student that works at a restaurant that I go to. He said they're doing remote learning, and they're doing Zoom classes, and then their small groups will get together and do their projects. So they're still meeting, but not in the same format that we've had before. And another example is the Fab Lab, where we have helped support them purchasing new equipment. They can schedule a time to go in there and work on that, you know. So, and I know like Chattanooga at one time needed another desk and another chair, and, you know, these things will be there when they're able to go back to class, even if it's in February or March. You know, we just don't know, and none of us know. But I would rather see us help them purchase something that we can put a tag on, and when the rubber meets the road, then, you know, they can't say that we wasted money, you know. So if we need a motion at this point, you know, I'm happy to make one. But historically, when the committee reviews the applications, if they feel like something doesn't qualify, then we don't approve the funds for it, and we give them a chance to submit for something else. So it's not anything that is set in stone. If they present it to us that we have to approve it before October, you know, we can tell them they have to resubmit. And we have done that in the past as well. So that's just what I can tell you from my history of being the chairman.
Susan, this is Michael. How much time, from historically, how much time did you give each one, just in case this comes up again this year? How much time did you give each institution for corrective language on their application?
They usually had a couple weeks. Yeah.
Well, hey, Susan, if you'll remember last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, we had the issue with one of the local colleges, and we gave them significantly more time, and we actually held money open for them to be able to modify their request. So
didn't they have a change of personnel or a dean or something along that line?
They did, but if I remember correctly, yeah, they also had some additional things that they wanted to add in that they didn't realize or they didn't read in the information about the amount of money that they would potentially be eligible for, and they wanted to amend. They wanted to amend their submittal, which we allowed them to do.
So, my thought is, with this particular application, that, you know, you could reply to them now and say, the committee decided this or this, and then if they need another week to update theirs, you know, that we could do whatever we need to do. You know, we're not trying to take their allotted funds away from them, and I'm sure they can find another way to spend the money. So.
Sure. And when I spoke with the program, I did advise them. I said, you know, have a plan B just in case. I said, I'll have to get back to them, and I'm fully prepared to get back to the program in question this afternoon and let them know the decision of this committee. And that will then at least provide another two full weeks, I believe, maybe even 2.5 weeks before the application is due.
So
Well, I
I'd
would
say
say
we definitely, yeah, we make that motion, then then that way, you know, we give them the 2 weeks, and just, you know, maybe we let them know, or somehow if for some reason they're running late and we need to give them a few more days, we could. But if it's 2 weeks, I'm kind of with you that I think they can find another way to spend the money. I've kind of done a 180 here on you guys, I know, but I do agree with let's try that.
Okay, it sounds like there's an agreement.
So, Michael, in this particular case, do we need that in the form of a motion and a vote?
I would actually like to ask Sherelle or Maria that because it's not a statute, it's merely a committee guideline. I am unclear as to whether there needs to be a motion.
We can err on the side of caution and do a motion that this is a decision, but as you said, I mean, it's implicit in already how things exist, but just since we're all here, might as well. Sherelle, do you have any input on that?
I agree. I think it would be good to have it on the record that this committee voted to not allow this for future applications.
Thank you, ladies.
All right, so let's see, Susan, I think you had begun to.
I volunteered. Okay, I make a motion. I'm going to make a two-part motion. The first part on the motion, I would like for us to remove the terminology intern development from our guidelines in paragraph 1 under solicitation of proposals. Then on part 2, I'd like for us to notify the university that we will not pay for student teacher assistant stipends, and that would be added to our list under these funds may not be used towards staff salaries, administrative costs, or student teacher assistant salaries, and then that we maintain our regular method of administering the grant funds, and if there are surplus funds, then we could maintain our special projects. I know that's really long.
It'll be in the minutes.
Okay.
Is there a motion? Do I hear a second?
This is Frank. I'll second the motion.
All right. There being a motion and a second, is there any additional discussion? Or Michael, do you, Sherelle, or Maria need clarification?
Yep. None for me. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Michael, would you administer the roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Heathcote.
Yes.
Ms. Ballard Gribble.
Yes.
Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Michael, I want to thank you, Maria, and Sherelle for helping us through this process and for getting this meeting put together today. And Frank, Brian, and obviously Susan, thank you so very much for your participation and input. This was really helpful. Thanks to everybody. If there being no other discussion, is there a motion to adjourn?
This is Frank. I move we adjourn.
Since the motion to adjourn takes precedence over all other business, we are officially adjourned. Michael,
Bye,
thank you.
everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you all for your time today.
Bye.
Bye-bye.